And we're so excited to have part two, and this is a collaboration between the AME Church Health Commission and the Alzheimer's Association on critical topics. And today we'll focus on what you should know about human research and clinical trials. And we're really excited to have two great speakers here with us today. So we'll get into our agenda. But before we do that, we'd like to let you know that first, this presentation is being recorded. That's very important. And from a housekeeping perspective, you should be in listen mode if you can, and mute your phone or mute your Zoom so that we don't get any background noise. I will be monitoring as moderator. I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, place them in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end of our presentations so that we can make sure that we hear all of this wonderful information from Dr. Burnett and Dr. Fuller. So with that, we're really excited, and we will start tonight with an opening prayer from Reverend Natalie Mitchum. Reverend Mitchum, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good evening, everybody. Let us pray. Most dear gracious and heavenly Father, we thank you that you are the one that gives us wisdom. You're the one that allows us to look deeper and get greater insight into what you would have us to learn. And we thank you in advance for your guidance. We thank you for our speakers on tonight and the information that you bless them with that will again enlighten us and allow us to make informed decisions regarding research, our health, and how to advise others. And we thank you for everyone who has joined, God. Of course, we do continue to pray for our nation and everything that we're experiencing in regards to COVID-19, this pandemic, the wildfires, and all of the social unrest that's going on. We trust you even in the midst of that, God. So again, thank you for blessing this event. In the name of Jesus we pray, amen and amen. Our scripture reading comes from Proverbs chapter 2, verses 9 through 11, and it reads, "Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be a pleasant to your soul." And verse 11, "Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you." That's the NIV version of the Bible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Mitchell. Thank you so much for that wonderful opening prayer. Now we will have opening greetings from Bishop Harry Seawright. Hi, Bishop Seawright, are you with us?
We can come back to him.
Okay, we'll come back to Bishop Seawright, and so we will move to Reverend Dr. Miriam Burnett for greetings and objectives from today's presentations. Dr. Burnett.
Greetings, everyone. It is my pleasure to be with you all on behalf of Reverend Natalie Mitchum and myself, Reverend Mitchum being the executive director and I being the medical director, and our great support that we get from our chairman, Bishop Harry Seawright. So I greet you on behalf of all of us. In addition, we have a couple of objectives for the day. I'm going to take us back to our agenda for just a second. We are going to talk about the AME Church Alzheimer's Partnership briefly, and then move right into understanding clinical studies, informed consent forms. I'm actually going to walk us through a template of a informed consent form. And then Reverend Dr. Ovita Fuller will talk about clinical trial phases and the process for vaccine and drug studies. We'll then open up for questions and then have final remarks by Dr. Hill and myself, with closing prayer by Reverend Mitchum. Our objective is to be able to provide everyone with the knowledge that will allow them to make, we use the term informed consent form, but really informed decisions about their lives and how they can access clinical trial information. There will be a part 3 where we'll actually be showing you how to go find clinical trials on a variety of topics and subjects. Back to you, Dr. Kill.
Oh, outstanding. Thank you so much, Dr. Burnett. And so I will check to see if Bishop Harry L. Seawright has joined us. Okay, all right, well, we'll keep moving. And so from the Alzheimer's Association perspective, just a wonderful, I think, opportunity to work with the African Methodist Episcopal Church. This is, I think, the type of partnership which allows us to really understand the opportunities to raise awareness around Alzheimer's disease and really engage the AME Church's members in our, fight, our relentless fight against Alzheimer's. So on behalf of our CEO, Harry Johns, and our Chief Strategy Officer, Dr. Joanne Pike, this is just a wonderful opportunity for us to engage. We know African Americans are at increased risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. African Americans are also less likely to have a diagnosis of their condition, resulting in less time for treatment and planning. So this partnership, this work that we're doing tonight will give us a chance to inform AME Church members and our family, our friends about Alzheimer's disease, risk factors, and the importance of early diagnosis and other important disease-related information. So this is just, it's a great chance, and we're really excited about it. And as Dr. Burnett said, this is part 2. There will be a part 3, and we're looking forward to continuing this momentum. And we thank everyone for participating tonight. So with that, I will introduce Reverend Dr. Miriam Burnett, who has been a leader in this partnership and really has outlined much of the parts of this webinar series. Dr. Burnett serves as the president of Resource and Promotion of Health Alliance, a nonprofit health education and promotion consulting company with innumerable years of experience aiding faith-based and community-based organizations as they strive to optimize health for their communities. Dr. Burnett embodies the rallying cry for a comprehensive approach to healing that encourages a dialogue, as we're doing tonight, as it seeks resources, destigmatized as it supports, educates, as it meditates. She sees faith-based organizations as specifically empowered to create this possibility and has put the power of her commitment to support their efforts. Dr. Burnett works extensively with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Disease Control, CDC there in Atlanta, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So she has, during 2 administrations, she's worked with the White House, Office of Neighborhood and Faith-Based Partnerships, Let's Move initiative. So Dr. Burnett has just done just a tremendous work, and she's an ordained and itinerant elder in September 1995 in the Columbia Annual Conference of 7th Episcopal District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church by Bishop John Hurst Adams. So Dr. Burnett is just well positioned and poised and has great expertise to share with us tonight about important opportunities and important information. And also, we are honored to have Dr. Ovida Fuller join us tonight. And so as I pull up Dr. Fuller's bio, Dr. Ovida, Reverend Dr. Ovida Fuller is an associate professor of microbiology and immunology in the medical school and faculty in the STEM initiative of the African Studies Center at the University of Michigan, my alma mater. Go Blue, Dr. Fuller. She's an adjunct professor at Payne Theological Seminary and an ordained itinerant elder and former pastor of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. As a scientist who studies and teaches about viruses, a virologist, Dr. Fuller's laboratory team published research on herpes simplex, influenza viruses, very relevant for what we're dealing with in today's pandemic. She teaches the University of Michigan medical, graduate, dental, and undergraduate students about human virus pathogens. Current implementation research science with the trusted messenger intervention that she developed engages networks of religious leaders as gatekeepers in communities of Zambia, South Africa, and sites in the USA for effective disease prevention. She also teaches extensive courses about what effective clergy should know about HIV/AIDS, and also health matters, what effective leaders should know. Dr. Fuller earned a BA and PhD from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and was a virology postdoctoral fellow at the University of Chicago. So we're really honored and blessed really to have two experts in this field join us this evening for the second part of this webinar series. And with that, I will turn it over to Reverend Dr. Miriam J. Burnett.
Thank you so very much. I am going to walk us through, actually, I pulled information from 3 or 4 different sites. So I'm going to give the disclaimer on the front end. I have benefited from that which is available to us from a variety of sources. You see me searching in my eyes to find out where did I do with the slides. And so here we go. Oh, down. Here we go. So I have pulled our information regarding human subject clinical studies and informed consent forms from the clinicaltrials.gov, Clinical Connection, which is the Alzheimer's Association Clinical Trials Network. We're actually going to watch a video from there. It's only 3 minutes, but it gives us a very good overview from the World Health Organization and from the FDA. We're actually going to start with that video. That video is right here. So share. Wait, I need to unshare because I forgot to say it was okay to listen to it. You have to do that. Otherwise, you get nothing.
Welcome to the clinicalconnection.com guide to understanding clinical trials. This short video will give you an introduction to clinical trials and answer some of the most common questions about them. A clinical trial is a research study done to determine if new treatment or therapy is safe and effective. Clinical trials are the most important step in approving new treatments and making them widely available. The existing treatments for many medical conditions may not be effective for everyone. Clinical trials can help determine whether new treatments are safer or more effective than those currently used. The treatments chosen for clinical trials show potential for being better than existing treatments, although sometimes are not as effective. Most medical treatments that are widely available have been tested in clinical trials in the past. There are several reasons you may be interested in joining a clinical trial. Clinical trials offer access to new treatments that may otherwise not be available. These new treatments may be safer and more effective than your current treatment. Also, by participating in clinical trials, you are contributing to research that may help others. If you participate in a clinical trial, you will be given information about the new treatment as well as potential risks and benefits of participating in the trial. You will be given an opportunity to ask questions before deciding whether or not to participate. The doctor or nurse that is supervising the clinical trial will ask you to provide informed consent. Informed consent is an acknowledgement that you understand the potential risks and benefits of the clinical trial and that you are freely deciding to participate. Once you have enrolled in a clinical trial, you will receive either the new treatment or a treatment that is already available in order to determine which one is more effective. During the trial, you will need to communicate regularly with the doctor or nurse supervising the study. If the new treatment being studied was effective for you, then you may be able to continue receiving this treatment even after the conclusion of the trial. Most people are eligible to participate in clinical trials. Many trials are for individuals who have a specific condition or illness and may benefit from new treatment. Although they are less common, there are also clinical trials for healthy volunteers. All clinical trials are reviewed by a panel of doctors and other professionals to determine if the study is safe, ethical, and well-designed. Although the final results of the clinical trial will be reported to the medical community, your name will never be used in these reports, and your participation is always anonymous. You can get more information about clinical trials from your doctor, the library, or by visiting www.clinicalconnection.com. If you are interested in participating in a clinical trial, there are several places you can find them. You can ask your doctor if there are any clinical trials currently available, or you may also search online for clinical trials at www.clinicalconnection.com.
It is good to get an overview, and now let us move to talking about some specifics. So she gave us an overview of what a clinical study is. It's research using primarily human volunteers, known as participants, with an intention to provide us with some additional medical knowledge. There are clinical trials, which are interventional, means something is done to the participant. And then there are the observational ones where they just watch and see what is happening. Clinical trials are based on specific interventions. They compare a new medical approach or look at whether or not a device or whether or not a drug or a vaccine are available. There is often a placebo, which contains no active ingredients in it as the control. There are also times where there's just no intervention done, and then there's an observation of what happens if a person does not participate in the trial itself. It's designed to make sure that new studies, new products, new approaches are being studied, where we don't know whether or not they'll be helpful or harmful, whether they make no difference at all. And investigators are trying to check on the safety and efficacy, whether it's safe to use and whether it works. There are multiple phases. I'm not going to go through that because Dr. Fuller is going to do that. In the US, they're defined by the Food and Drug Administration. It is based on a protocol. There are steps to a clinical study. They have to provide the reason for the study, who can participate. We know that as eligibility criteria. We have to know the number of participants needed. It often includes not only the schedule of tests and procedures and drugs and their dose, how long is the study going to go on, and what kind of information is going to be obtained from the participants. All of this has to be detailed in the informed consent, and I'm going to go walk through that in a few minutes. But if you are considering a clinical trial, there are 3 slides of questions that you should ask yourself. And this has been provided to us by clinicaltrials.gov. These are, I saw no reason to reinvent the wheel because these are the questions that I was going to give you. So I just copy and pasted. What is being studied? Why do researchers believe the intervention being studied might be effective and why not? Has it ever been tested before? What are the possible interventions? Or in other words, what is going to potentially be done to me? How will it be determined whether I'll receive the intervention or whether I'll receive the placebo? Who will know which intervention was being provided? What are the possible risks and side effects and benefits, which can be, the benefits can be to the person who is the participant, or it could be for, let's call it the common good, for others. We also need to know what will we have to do when we participate. And also as important is what can't you do? Oftentimes during a study, there are things that they don't want to have confounding the issue, that they don't want to make it complicated, that they don't want interference. So for instance, take a medication trial. You potentially are going to be told, do not take this list of over-the-counter medications or herbal products because it could cause some interference. So not only what will I have to do, but also what can't I do? What tests and procedures are involved? How often will I have to visit the clinic or the hospital? How often am I going to have to be checked? Will hospitalization be required? In some studies, you actually have to be hospitalized. How long will the study last? Is there any pay for participation? Will I be reimbursed for other expenses like travel back and forth to the hospital or the clinic? What type of long-term follow-up is there as a part of the trial? Am I going to get followed up 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Or is it only a short-term during the actual trial that I will be followed? If I'm not going to be followed long-term, how do I connect back in if something occurs? If I benefit from the intervention, will I be allowed to continue receiving it after the trial ends? That is not always a yes answer. It depends on what is found in the trial. Will results of the trial be provided to me? To some extent, yes, and to some extent, no. There are ways to see what happens by going to the NIH website or to the clinicaltrials.gov website to find out what is happening with the study. Has it moved to the next level? But you will not be provided with the specifics for what happened to other people. That's the confidentiality piece. You don't want your stuff out there, just like others don't want theirs either. Who will oversee my medical care while participating in the trial? Will it be my primary care physician, or am I going to be shifted to someone else? What happens if I become injured during the study, and what becomes the options? Then we talk about an informed consent. Those are the questions you should have in the back of your mind while you are reading an informed consent. And I'm moving a little quickly because I really want Dr. Fuller to spend an in-depth time talking about the trial phases. I'm going to show you an informed consent, which is the process so that you can learn the key facts about the trial before I should have underlined and capitalized it, before deciding whether to participate. This information should be provided to you so that you will know what you're walking into as well as what to expect during the trial. The document contains details as purpose, duration, required procedures, and how to contact the various people involved. It explains risks and potential benefits. I'm going to now show you a template that came from the World Health Organization. I'm going to make this as large as I can so that you can actually see. It is supposed to be written in common language. And so common language to the research and medical community usually means that of a local student's 6th or 8th grade language. It should also be in the patient's primary language. If a person speaks primarily Spanish, do not accept an English consent form. It needs to be in the language that that person will understand. There needs to be someone walking through the consent form with that person. It needs to have the logo of the institution, not FDA, World Health Organization, CDC, anybody else's logo on it. Whoever you are working with for the clinical trial, that's whose logo, because that tells you who is responsible. Okay? This is the long form, and you will see that it says it's 10 pages long. There's a short form to be used for social science studies, and then there's the long form for the more in-depth, especially medical, vaccine, drug, potentially even medical device forms. The informed consent says, who is this for? Who is it written for? Is it for healthcare workers, patients, parents of workers, and it needs to be delineated. Then you get the name of the principal investigator. The principal investigator is the person actually responsible at that site for conducting the work, followed by the name of the organization and the sponsoring body. If it is a study that is multiple academic institutions are involved in it, it may have the name of the academic institution you are affiliated with, but the name of the sponsor will be the consortium of all of those institutions. Then you get the name of the proposal and which version is it. Sometimes you're on version 2, 3, or 4 because it's been sent back to the Institutional Review Board several times to get it right. The Institutional Review Board is that body who ensures that all of the mandates by law are being sent. There are 2 parts to the form. One is an information sheet, and the other one is the certification of consent, where you will be asked to sign. The information sheet starts with an introduction that gives a brief overview of what the study is about. Then it goes to the purpose of the research. Do not accept something that is in language that is I call it medicalese, where it uses terms like pathogenesis and indicators and determinants and vectors, or it should use terms like, instead of amphilophobia, I have always messed this word up, and anopheles instead of mosquito. You should use the more common language that is used in that local area. Some of us call things differently when we're going through when we're in different regions of the world, let alone different regions of the country. Think of it like this. When I'm in New York, a carbonated drink is a soda. But if I'm in Ohio, it's a pop. So depending on where you are in the country and around the world, different things are called different things. And so they need to be better explained in a way that can be understood by the common man, not the researcher, or in the cases that we'll be talking about in depth, the medical community. We need to know what kind of research this is. Is it a one-time shot, you get an injection? Is it an interview? Is it a series of fingerprint pricks? Is it we're going to implant a device? What kind of research is it? And how are we looking to select people? That would also include inclusion criteria. How were you able to participate? Who's eligible, who's not? And the fact that every clinical trial has to be a volunteer basis. You have to have the ability to say, I'm going to participate or I'm not. There should be no collusion or twisting your arm to make you participate in a clinical trial. Give all of the information and let you make an informed decision. On top of that, for clinical trials, you have the ability to say, I've had enough of this. I want out. And that be accepted without, they can ask you why you want to come out, what are you experiencing maybe that you haven't offered up before, those kind of things. But you have to be able to pull out of a clinical trial if you so desire. You can change your mind. Then there has to be information on the trial drug to include its name or any potential side effects, any toxicity, any adverse effects, anything that not only goes for drugs, but it also goes for anything that is, they're using trial drug here, but it could have said information on the medical device or information on the vaccine. In addition to that, it has to provide you with who manufactured it, where was it manufactured, and what was the reason for development. Then what is the actual procedure and protocol? When's it going to be done? How's it going to be done? The step-by-step, the tests that will be done, any medications that will potentially be given be up and beyond the trial medication. You have to know what to expect, when to expect it, how to expect it to happen. And it has to be in lay terms. If there are unfamiliar procedures being talked about, one, you have the opportunity to ask more questions than that is just written here, written in this section. And you have to have the option of having a procedure that is involved in it given to you in detail. The next thing that is important is the description of the process. I've already said that to some extent. What will happen step by step? What is the duration to include how many times a week you'll need to show, or how many days in total, over what period, whether it be weeks or months, potentially years. How often will you have to come into the medical facility, and how long will you have to be there? All right, the example here is I've been asked to come in 5 times to the clinic in 6 months. The line that is missing here is, and when I get there, I'll be there for an hour. All right. We are to be told potential side effects anticipated, And what will happen if a side effect or an unexpected event occurs? What are the possible or anticipated risks? One of the reasons for doing a study is you don't necessarily know what the risks are, but they should have a good idea about what potentially could happen by the time they get to a human trial. And I'm going to defer that to Dr. Fuller, because I don't want to steal her thunder about the phases of a clinical trial. You also have to be told about the benefits, not only to the benefits for the individual who is participating, but the potential benefits to the community in which that person resides, as well as for the common good. I talked about reimbursements. They are not incentives. They are not to be incentives. They are supposed to be to reimburse for expenses incurred as a result of the participation. Travel costs, lost wages for having to go in to the facility, parking, all those kinds of things. Not a gift for participating. And then this is the big key for one of the big keys for me is confidentiality. Your information is not to be shared with anyone other than the research team. And if it is a double-blinded study, that means no one will know until it is quote unquote unblinded, where your name is matched up or your number is matched up so they can unlock and see who got what. And that becomes real important if things have not gone the way they should and the study is stopped early, and it also is necessary for long-term follow-up. The sharing of the results can occur through publications and conferences, but your name and information that drills down that could help somebody identify that you participated is not a part of the sharing of the results. Again, you have the right to refuse or withdraw. You can say, I don't like anything that's here and not participate at all. Or you also have the opportunity to withdraw at any point in the process. You have to be provided with, or what are the alternatives? If I don't do this new thing, what is the already established treatment or protocol that I could, not protocol, what is the established treatment that I can participate? And then you have to be told why one is better for you, particularly you, than another. The last part of it is who to contact, the name and the contact information of someone who is involved, informed, and accessible is supposed to be on the form. That includes address and telephone number. And then you certify the form. I have gone through everything that I have in the rest of my slides. And so because I really want us to go through some dialogue, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fuller. This presentation will be available on the Health Commission website in the next few days.
All right.
Fuller, you are, I think I stopped sharing so you can.
All right, great. Thank you, Dr. Burnett. I want to first thank the Alzheimer's Association and the AME International Health Commission for sponsoring these bioethics series. It's very important and timely and something that we need to do, particularly among communities of color. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But so I just want to say thank you for hosting this. I am going to follow up with what Dr. Burnett was sharing and look at what you should know about clinical trials from a higher perspective or a further away perspective. She took you down into the trees with what should happen for a consent form and a study that you're considering. I'm going to look at the overall process of what a clinical trial is, what are the phases, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 vaccines that are currently in development. So again, thank you all for coming and for hosting this. Just so from the beginning that we're all on the same page, I know we're all in this COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic, which means it's around the globe, but I want to be sure that we are able to use the same language. As a professor of microbiology, it's really good to know terms and make sure that people you're talking to. So this is the coronavirus. This is what you see as a model for coronavirus. You see all the time. It's a virus with these projections or proteins on the outside that are called spikes, and that's called a crown, hence the coronavirus, which is Latin for crown. And then the major two pieces of terminology I want you to know for sure as we go through the night is that COVID-19 is the disease or illness that we're talking about. It's technically coronavirus, which is the family of viruses, infectious disease 2019. So COVID-19 stands for this, and it's the disease, it's the illness. It's like for HIV/AIDS, AIDS is the illness, HIV is the virus. SARS coronavirus 2 is the name of the virus that causes this disease. It's the one that is being spread. It is what we're looking to find vaccines that will stop its replication or drugs that will stop its ability to cause disease. It was initially called the novel coronavirus because it had never been seen before, even though we have several other epidemics or pandemics or epidemics of coronavirus. SARS, as you may recall, back in the early 2000s, and then Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome virus, which came out in 2012 or so in the Middle East area. Both of these are coronavirus that affect humans. And there are about 4 others that affect humans as well, but they cause something like the common cold. So this new coronavirus that evolved out of bats into some species into humans is officially called SARS coronavirus 2. And what I'm showing you here, just so you get an idea of how easy it is for this virus to reproduce, this is one area of a kidney cell that has been infected and is producing viruses. These actually are probably a lung cell. Let me take that back. These little projections are cilia on this one cell, which you can't even see the whole cell. This is a huge magnified piece. And then these little yellow dots are viruses that have been produced from that one infected cell. So you can imagine if you get a few viruses in you and you get a few cells infected and producing virus, this virus is very good at transmitting and making more of itself. So that's just a little bit of background. All right, so because this is a bioethics series and the first series done by Dr. Reuben Warren from the Tuskegee Center for Bioethics and Research, talked about the history of biomedical research and human subject research. So I wanted to pick up from where he left with a brief history of the international guidelines for ethical standards in medical research. As Dr. Burnett showed you, one cannot just go conduct studies on human subjects or clinical trials. And so thus, this shows you the evolution, if you will, of the very specific guidelines for ethical standards in medical research. The Nuremberg trials that came out of the World War II, in December 1946 and 47, there were doctors that were tried for war crimes and crimes against humanity. They conducted experiments against prisoners and civilians, and that resulted in something called the Nuremberg Code, which prohibited this sort of research without the necessary guidelines to be followed. That was followed in 1964 by a declaration of Helsinki for biomedical research and clinical research, which again increased the standards that are used internationally. And so, this is pretty much, these have been revised over the last years, but this is the basis for what Dr. Burnett took you through. And yet we look at what Dr. Warren talked about last time, the Tuskegee syphilis study, which started in 1932, but did not end until 1972. It was a longitudinal study. And even though we were going through these ethical standards development and they were well in place by 1964, this continued. So this was, as you heard, on African-American men in the area of Tuskegee, Alabama, where they were studied for the natural course of syphilis without being given treatment that became available for it, nor being told exactly what was occurring. In 1968, the ethics of the study was questioned. In 1969, after that had occurred, CDC reaffirmed that the study was needed. Excuse me, and the study was supported by the American Medical Association. So it continued until 1973. There was a congressional hearing. The study was actually stopped in 1972. In 1974, there was an out-of-court settlement reached for the men in the study who were still alive, and then later including their children and spouses. In 1997, as Dr. Rubin told you, the President Clinton apologized for the great wrongs that were done in the Tuskegee study. In 1999, the Tuskegee University National Center for Bioethics and Research in Healthcare was established. And then in 2001, the President's Council on Bioethics established, which is part of what has to happen in the US now in order to get a vaccine or drug approved. So this gives you the basic guidelines. And the reason I show you this is one of the reasons we're doing this series is because African Americans must be involved in the clinical trials in order for them to be approved. And yet we are very much remembering Tuskegee and other things that have occurred. So I wanted you to know this history as we move forward into looking at what clinical trials require. All right, so this is really the main dish for tonight. This is the main information that I want you to walk away with. So backing up again and now looking at a satellite view of the process, whereas Dr. Burnett took you down into the details, into the trees. Let's back it up a little bit and look at the whole process of what has to happen if a drug or a vaccine is going to be approved for use in humans, or even if there's going to be research to see if that's going to happen. So here again, we're looking at the clinical trial phases and the process. The phases go from preclinical or phase 0, which I've listed over here, as well as here, and it doesn't really matter whether you use Roman numbers or regular numbers. This shows you a diagram of the number of people and a summary of what has to happen. And then here I have some of the details of what each phase of a clinical research trial includes. So before there's ever a trial, before it ever reaches humans or at least reaches a research level in humans, there's a preclinical or laboratory or animal studies to establish if an intervention or vaccine or process or drug seems to be working in an experimental study. Does it have the desired effect? So with coronavirus, we want to find something in a drug that will prevent the virus from reproducing itself. And so that has to happen in laboratories someplace. And we have scientists all over the country and world actually now turning to research on coronavirus to look at it, how it works and what could possibly stop it, to understand it better. Those studies then have to go through a protocol through the IRB or the Internal Review Board, part of the President's Council of Research Safety, that says we have evidence that this should be tested in humans, should move to the next level to see if it will be effective. And so the very first thing that's done is a phase 1 trial, which is a safety trial. So whatever comes out of here, whether it's a drug or a vaccine or some other intervention, initially goes into phase 1 trials, which are to ask, is this safe? This is preclinical data, and IRB approval has to have occurred from phase 0. This study enrolls somewhere between 10 and 25 healthy people typically, who volunteer to receive the intervention, the drug or the vaccine. We know that they're in it, they know that they're in it, each of them gets the drug, and there must be women as well as children, as well as pregnant women, as well as elderly in this study to make sure that the safety is across a broad spectrum of people. The safety study lasts typically somewhere between 6 and 12 months. And what I'm going to give you is the typical clinical research trial time. We know with COVID that's changed a little bit, and I'll explain that a little bit later. So the first trial is phase 1 with a few people in it. These people are healthy, and the main objective is to see if this, whatever is being used, is safe in humans. Safety is the issue here. Once a drug or vaccine passes this stage, it goes into phase 2 trials. And there are certain criteria to say it is able to go forth from phase 1 to phase 2. This is an efficacy exploration trial. This takes approximately 20 to 300 people to engage, and it's designed to find out what is effective at treating the disease that you want to treat. So let's say we had a clinical trial for something that affected Alzheimer's. We would then enroll people who had already been diagnosed with Alzheimer's to ask if giving them this particular new research drug or vaccine that we're looking at affects their overall illness. Does it change their disease process? Does it slow it? Does it do whatever we think it does? Whereas this was with healthy people, has to be with people who are treated, who have the disease or the condition. We're looking at things like how much to give that works, so there might be different doses that are given in different ways. We're asking, did those doses make a difference in the illness? We're asking also, is it safe? What's the best delivery type? So do you ingest it if it's a vaccine? Do you get it in your arm if it's a vaccine? What are the side effects? Do people get a fever? How much of a fever? Do they get body aches? Again, it's patients, and it has to be inclusive of a wide range of people. This study typically lasts anywhere from 6 months to several years. And this is known as an efficacy study, a smaller efficacy phase 2 study. If things look good there, then, and it meets the criteria, it moves into a phase 3 study, which is a large-scale safety and effectiveness study. Efficacy means, does it work and is it effective? So this is known as a therapeutic confirmation. Any material that makes it through here and looks reasonably good according to certain criteria that are established makes it to the phase 3. Here now we're looking at hundreds to thousands plus of people. A typical study would have around 3,000 people. It would be conducted in multiple sites. So it can't all be done in Alabama or in Raleigh, North Carolina, or the East Coast or West Coast. It has to be in multiple sites. So for example, at the University of Michigan, we can enroll 1,000 people in the COVID-19 vaccine trials. At Chicago Medical Center, they probably can enroll a certain number. So this is spread out around the country in multiple sites. It also is a double-blind study, typically, which means that neither the researchers nor the people involved know whether they're getting the actual drug or vaccine or a placebo, something that is injected or something that's given the same way, but it doesn't have the substance that you want to test. So neither the researchers nor the participants know. It's typically a randomized control study, meaning you do have people who get the treatment and people who don't, and these people are randomly assigned into those two groups. So if you sign up for a phase 3 clinical trial, you may get, let's say for a COVID vaccine, you may get the material that should actually be in the vaccine, or you may get just simply a placebo or salt water or the material without any vaccine. That means that then when we compare the results, nobody can predict what's going to happen. We have to look at what the data, the science says. The enrollees are looking at side effects. They're looking at whether the dosage works. They're looking at, does it prevent the disease? They're looking at if there's any toxicity. Does it make people sick? Does it cause a rash? Does it lead to some sort of tumor or something? And then again, this has to be people who either have or will get the disorder. So in the case of COVID, it's enrolling people like us who are susceptible to COVID. So it has, quote, healthy people, but also people who could get COVID. And with these phase 3 trials for COVID, one has to wait to see the natural course of exposure and the number of cases that have to come up. So rather than 3,000 people for the COVID vaccines, we're looking more so like 30,000 people at a minimum in order to test the efficacy in a phase 3 trial. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. Typically, these go on for up to 5 years. And that brings out that if you have 3,000 people that you're watching over 5 years, you can follow the disease a little bit more effectively. Or you can, let's say if we're a vaccine, you would ask how many of those 3,000 people actually get exposed to the microbe and actually get, in this case, COVID over 5 years. But because we want to do this a little bit more quickly because it's necessary to save lives, we have to enroll at a minimum 30,000 people to look at the effect over a shorter amount of time. But we need to get the number of cases up within those 30,000 people. So the data, the calculations say that you need that many people if you're going to use a shorter amount of time. If the phase 3 clinical data resulting from these number of people, 3,000 over 5 years or more, or 30,000 over 4 months or whatever it takes, if that looks promising, and the criteria for a COVID vaccine is that 50% of the cases seen with the placebo are blocked in the people that get the vaccine. So the vaccine has to stop 50% of the cases for the people who got the vaccine. Most of the times a vaccine must be at 70% effective, but because of the urgency and the need to stop COVID and to prevent lives, because we don't have treatment, the criteria for moving to the next phase is set at 50%. At this point, whoever's developing the reagent actually applies to the FDA and submits their data from the previous trials all the way from preclinical to the phase 3. This can be thousands of pages of data. The FDA has people who go through that and summarize it, and sometimes it's sent back to the company or whoever the developer is to say, we need you to do this more. It usually takes about 2 to 3 years to get something through an FDA approval process. And this is the go or no-go process. Not only do you have FDA or Federal Drug Administration people, but you also have an advisory board that's made up of experts who are not part of FDA, but are employed by the government on a limited basis to be an advisory to the FDA. So the summary from the FDA then goes to that advisory board, who can also say, go back and include this, or this data doesn't seem strong enough. Or in the case of COVID, did you include enough people over 65? Or did you include enough children? Or did you include enough women who were pregnant? So both the FDA committee as well as the advisory committee at this point can send something back. Whenever a reagent meets all the criteria of the FDA, of the clinical trial guidelines, passes the ethics, meaning has it been tested in the proper manner? Are the results what we want, would warrant going forward? Is it not toxic, or is the risk of taking it greater than the risk of the disease? Right now, the risk of COVID for many people is severe illness and death, so we don't have anything to treat it. And then we go, if it passes this point, it goes into use, and there's still a phase 4, which is an ongoing surveillance where researchers are monitoring the side effects, the long-term adverse effects. Does it remain effective at doing what it said to do? Is there a combination of this vaccine or this drug with other things that are out there that cause difficulty. So some people may not be able to take, say, ACE inhibitors and a COVID-19 vaccine, perhaps theoretically. What are the needed improvements? What's the distribution and storage? So long-term safety, someone will be looking 10 years from now or 15 years from now, if we get a vaccine, to say, did the people who got the vaccine have some long-term effect that we could not see in this therapeutic phase 3 section? And so whatever is used has to be better than what's available already. So let's say we do have drugs to treat Alzheimer's, or to slow Alzheimer's. If we were doing an Alzheimer's trial, we will want something to go from phase 3 to phase 4 that is better than what we already have. And the researchers have to prove that. So that's the phases and purposes of clinical research trials, all the way from the initial laboratory research to the safety, efficacy, the larger trials. And this is where we have to have a large number of people involved in order to make sure that it's safe and effective across a range of people. And then lastly, the surveillance part to understand the long-term effects. All right, so that's the view of clinical trial phases and the process. And what I want to do now is just take you briefly into where we are with the COVID-19 vaccine. First of all, let me say we don't have any sort of drug except one that is used to treat very severely sick people with COVID-19, with the idea of hopefully reversing them from death. And that's one drug that we have that's FDA approved for some limited studies or limited use. We have no vaccines in the US that are approved. There are 5 around the world that have limited approval, but those haven't necessarily met the standards that we hold here in the USA. So here's the summary of where we are as of yesterday for COVID-19 vaccine candidates. There are 91 reagents that are in the preclinical phase, so they're at the point of being investigated at the laboratory or animal stage. There are 28 that have passed into phase 1 clinical trials, where they're looking at safety in healthy people. So they're being injected into people who have been enrolled in these phase 1 safety studies to ask, does getting this drug or reagent, actually, we're looking at vaccine, so it could be another virus, it could be parts of the coronavirus genetic material, it could be part of the coronavirus protein. Phase 1 is asking, is it safe? And that we have 28 vaccine candidates that are in that phase. Those that pass that have moved into phase 2. So we currently have 14 vaccine candidates that have moved into phase 2, where we're looking at the effectiveness at treating diseases. And so this was looked at with people who are at risk of coronavirus infection. And does it actually stop the people who get the vaccine from getting COVID when they are exposed? And they aren't purposefully exposed. They're typically exposed in the course of normal activity. Those that work at phase 2 or pass certain criteria, which is 50% effectiveness, then go into phase 3 trials. We have now 11 vaccine candidates that are in phase 3. If you had asked me 2 weeks ago, we would have had 5. So you can see that there is a huge push by many pharmaceutical companies to get into, to find something that works for COVID-19. And I put this arrow here because this is where the real issue comes in. In order to do phase 3 trials, one has to have lots of people. Why is that? Because unlike the 5 years that we have to do a typical clinical trial, the goal here is, because there's nothing else to stop COVID, we want to get to a vaccine. Herd immunity, which means getting enough people infected that people are immune to being infected, and thus your population is immune, will not work for COVID because it is such a severe disease and it spreads so easily that we would have huge casualties in that process, and it would take a long time. So rather than having 3,000 people over 5 years for the COVID vaccines, if a vaccine is a double dose, meaning you get injected You go for a month or so to allow your body's immune system to build up the defenses, the antibodies, and other things that we're looking for that will fight COVID. Then you come back for a booster shot, and that amplifies the response, the immune response. So this is a double dose, and those require 30,000 people to be enrolled in order to get the numbers to say whether or not this is working to stop coronavirus and COVID illness, or if it's not working. So 15,000 will get the vaccine reagent, 15,000 will get a placebo or sugar water or salt or whatever it is. And that's if you get it in 2 doses. There are some vaccine candidates that are purported to be able to use as 1 dose. So that 1 dose will allow the virus or the body to make a strong defense or offense against the actual virus, such that it can block 50% of the new infections and disease with COVID. So for that study, because you only do it 1 injection, we need more people. So 60,000 people have to be enrolled in a single dose vaccine reagent trial. And so here's where we are. In order to go into the phase 3 trials, of which we have 11 reagents that are already here and others that are getting the data from phase 2, hoping that they will go in here. And usually some percentage of drugs or vaccine candidates that enter into the phases move to the next. I don't know what it is for the COVID vaccines. So we need a lot of people to enroll in clinical trials if we're going to get phase 3 done. Not only do we need a lot of people, but we need those people to have a wide range of demographics, from very young to very old, from men and women, women who are pregnant, young adults, African Americans, Latinas, a range of ethnicities and locations. People who have underlying diseases, people who don't have underlying diseases. We need this to look like the population that is most affected by COVID, or that is being affected by COVID, and that's everybody. So herein is where the dilemma lies. And so I want to just spend the next few minutes explaining the dilemma in a little bit more detail. If we don't all work together, we won't get through phase 3 to find something that can apply for FDA approval. This is not political. This is absolutely where we are in terms of what makes a vaccine approved and available for people. Once something is approved, we also have to look at distribution, storage, manufacturing enough, and what is going to be the process to get it to people in a way that fits the priority. Obviously, healthcare workers are top priority and first responders. So with COVID, we now know that it is disproportionately affecting particularly African Americans and people of color. And there are lots of reasons for this that we don't have time to go into tonight. But this is just showing you some early data from around the country. The left side has the percent of African Americans in the area by population, and the right side of the graph has the number of people that cases and deaths from COVID. And so you can see the disproportionate amount, 26% of the population of Milwaukee County is African American, but early on there were 73% of the deaths. In Michigan here where I live, 14% of the population is African American, 41% of the deaths from COVID early on were in African Americans. We can look at Chicago residents, we can look at cases, and again, this was early on, this is April data, where we see that Black Americans and non-Latinx were the highest among the cases. And look at the deaths, we were highest among the deaths. So when we think of a vaccine candidate for COVID, we have to make sure that it has a high percentage or high number of African Americans that span the age and circumstance and underlying disease spectrum. So I just would like to conclude with some questions, and then we'll open this up for questions. So COVID-19 and African Americans, some questions. What is needed if we are to engage vaccine trials or approve vaccines. I showed you the Tuskegee syphilis study data, and Dr. Warren talked about it. Often people say, well, you know, I will not be a guinea pig. I remember Tuskegee. Yet for African Americans, for Black Americans, we will have to be within those phase 3 clinical trials if they ever are going to be able to be approved. Dr. Burnett walked you through what questions need to be asked. So what I am saying is what we need to do is that the research community needs to show that they are trustworthy. They lost our trust with the Tuskegee studies and many other things that have been done. But that community can show its trustworthiness by sharing information, by sending trusted messengers who look like us to our communities and to our leaders, by explaining things, by being transparent, by making information available, by answering questions, by providing the supports needed. Maybe some people do need more transportation funds to get to a study site than others. Whatever is needed, the trustworthiness needs to be shown by the researchers, including the government, all the way to NIH, to the physicians involved, to the universities involved. And then people who are interested need not to say, no, I won't be in a clinical trial because I remember Tuskegee. We have to move past that history. So we have to trust enough to look at the data and verify if this study is for us, using the questions that were mentioned earlier. So it's a two-way thing. We have to meet each other where we can both participate and feel that we can trust the people that are coming to us because they have proven themselves to be worthy of our trust. How do we navigate this time as community, as researchers? As community, we've got to talk to each other. We've got to learn about the studies. We've got to ask questions. We've got to continue to be on this. It's not a simple fix because we have nothing else. We don't have any other way except the public health preventions that are not working so well in the USA. Researchers need to be transparent and open in dialogue. What strategies or resources can help? Well, things like this webinar. There are lots of other resources that are available. Community leaders, faith leaders, organization leaders need to avail themselves of that. And researchers and physicians need to make themselves available. When will this be over? What is the end game? There will probably not be a magic vaccine that will completely stop COVID. There will be likely, if we're fortunate, a vaccine that can work to prevent somewhere between 50 and 60% of the infections for a period. We don't even know enough with coronavirus to know if the immunity that happens will last for years. For example, with measles and mumps, you get one vaccine and you're done for your lifetime. With influenza, you get it every year. So we don't think it's going to be like influenza, but we also don't believe it's going to be like measles or mumps. So we don't know. The end game then will be a combination of some people having some immunity and the rest of us using the protections that are available to us now through public health means, which I'm going to summarize in just a minute. And then what will be the long-term changes in the church, since this is sponsored by the AME Health Commission, our communities, our families, our interactions. I don't think we will ever go back to where we were before. Why do I say this? Just in summary, COVID spreads as a respiratory virus from person to person. When someone who's infected, who may or may not know, breathes out virus, it's inhaled by the other person. If you are 6 feet away, you're less likely to inhale virus in the air. If you're wearing a mask, if the person who is infected is wearing a mask and the person in the area is wearing a mask and you're 6 feet apart, you're less likely to get the virus in your body. So it's carried by respiratory droplets. The virus can remain on surfaces. So the preventions are all public health preventions: social distancing, 6 feet or more, staying away from inhaling air droplets, staying home so you're not out in an environment where the virus you can encounter it, avoiding gatherings or crowds, wearing a mask correctly when away from your home, disinfecting surfaces, washing hands, and avoiding touching faces or the particles that fall to surfaces. And then the last slide is remember to wear your mask correctly. So the end game is probably going to be a combination of a vaccine that has some effect and these public health interventions, of which preventing inhaling virus is going to be one of them. The mask is going to be with us for a while. You want to make sure it fits. You want to make sure it's on properly. You want to make sure you don't touch the front of it. You want to be sure you take it off carefully. You want to make sure your nose and your mouth are covered. So these are the things that we need to do, combining when we get a vaccine, if that happens, if it makes FDA approval with the public health interventions. And I'll stop here, and hopefully we can entertain a discussion. The bottom line is we're going to need to participate, or we do need to participate in vaccine trials when they work for us. It is important to ask those questions that Dr. Burnett mentioned. It's important to consult resources, to have an advocate that can walk through with you through a consent form before you ever agree. Even if the money or reimbursement sounds great, or even if it seems like a good idea, you want to verify. You want to look at the details. You want to make sure it works for you and that you know the risk and the procedure that you're taking. But it is critical that we do this. If we don't do this together, all of us, then we will never get to a vaccine if there is one to be made. So I'll stop here so we can have
All right, outstanding. Thank you so much. Two just, I think, fantastic, informative, and just well-delivered presentations from Dr. Burnett and Dr. Fuller. Let's go to some questions to take advantage of the 15 minutes that we have. So, Dr. Fuller, regarding developing a vaccine for COVID, is it better to conduct phase 2 and 3 clinical trials in places where there is a high positive test rate, say greater than 10%? And that came from Jerry Caldwell.
I think that there are going to be cases where we want to have a lot of cases, where we have a lot of COVID, but then there also has to be places where we don't have a lot, because we want to know if the exposure to the virus in both circumstances will be blocked by the virus, by the vaccine. So yes, we do need to be in places where we're going to get a lot of cases, because that's going to help the numbers to tell us whether we're going to get enough new cases to see whether the people in the placebo differ from the people who get the vaccine. But we need it in other places as well.
Okay, all right. And so also from Tina Thomas to Dr. Burnett, what things should we be on the lookout for, we all, our community, that would be an indicator of a clinical trial that may not be reputable?
Well, the first thing would be if the informed consent is not completely filled out. If it's written in a language that you don't understand and someone is not willing, one of the investigators is not willing to break it down for you. As you saw, the requirement is that it be written in layman's terms. If it is not, that's the first red flag. Second red flag is I can't get it explained to me so that I understand it. Those first 1 and 2 are the first two things that raise a flag. I think the other thing for us as African Americans and those of the African diaspora is, what are our medical schools saying? There is now increased involvement in our Meharry, Morehouse School of Medicine are involved in, let's say, the COVID trials. What are they saying?
Yeah.
What are the people like Dr. Reuben Warren saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Our trusted messengers. What is Dr. Fuller saying?
Yeah.
If Dr. Fuller says we should do this, then I'm more likely to do it, because she is to use some of her language, a trusted messenger.
Yeah.
Who has provided the information that says yes or no, this trial sits in something that we should begin to evaluate for ourselves.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Trusted institutions, that's really important, Dr. Burnett. So
Dr.
also,
Gill, could I just quickly
absolutely.
say
Yeah.
a phrase that we're using is pause, trust, and verify. So in other words, stop for a moment, look at what's before you. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction, say, oh, I'm not doing that, I'm not considering that. Pause, trust enough to consider the details. Look at the details, weigh them, consult people, and then, and that's the verification process. If it's for you, you'll see that, or you'll be able to consult someone. If it's not for you, that's okay, but you've trusted enough to check it out. So pause, trust, and verify.
I like that.
Let me add also, those of us who are in the AME church and other denominations are people of faith. And we always talk about discernment. This is another opportunity for you to hear from God and say yes or no.
And check your facts.
And check, well, yeah, the science, the science and the faith have to go side by side, hand in hand.
That's right. It's a
That's
walk
right.
of faith.
That's right. Okay. All right. So your comment from Tanisha Tyler Carr, who says that she served as a healthy volunteer in the Alzheimer's Association's trial match program as a healthy volunteer. So that's a great resource to find out how and if you match to a clinical trial, your eligibility. And so you can, I'll put the link online for that. But as African Americans, it's important for us to participate in clinical trials to find effective treatments. Absolutely. I agree with that, Tanisha.
Yeah.
So from Chris, our friend Chris, the blood pressure medication, Chris likes, the blood pressure medication, telmisartan, has been associated with reduced risk of Alzheimer's in white Americans, but it has not been evaluated in African Americans. Should we let more people know about this, or just wait until more African Americans join the study and get better results for African Americans? So how should the community see some of these treatments that have not been as diverse as we need them to be?
Well, part of that is what we're going to do in webinar number 3. We're going to, you Dr. Hill, are going to talk about some of the Alzheimer's trials. One of the things that we have to do is make people aware of where to get the information, how to get the information, be able to assess what might work for them and what might not work for them, and explore not only for Alzheimer's, but for all of the cancers and chronic diseases. There are multiple trials where we were not involved in those trials, and therefore we don't know whether they work for us or they don't, or they do. We don't know whether they're bad for us or whether they're good for us. And so many of the medications we've been given along the way, we've done the trial and error ourselves.
The contraindicators that can happen with us come up because we are not in the trials. Right. And so it's very important that African Americans and other people participate in clinical trials, but particularly us, because we tend not to do it because we remember Tuskegee, and there's a knee-jerk reaction that says, not me. In other words, if we're not in the trials, we don't know how the vaccines or drugs work on us. And so we have to do it, but yet we want to do it in a way that lets us feel a little bit more secure. So researchers have to be transparent and trustworthy in order to enroll us, but we should enroll.
Absolutely. Thank you. Also, from my friend Terry Laws, could you argue that clinical trial participation can be seen as a political act? Our tax dollars help to pay for COVID research and vaccine development, and will be used for distribution.
I don't know if it's a political act. I think it's a survival act. I think it's important to give the option, to check out the option. It may not be for you, but if you can, it's a very important thing to do as a citizen, looking at the whole better, more so than your individual benefit. It is a benefit to the individual, as Dr. Burnett said, that you then get a choice of getting medical care of the new reagent or something else. But it is a service to the community to be in a clinical trial. And not everybody can do it, but for those who can and where it fits, we should do it.
Absolutely. Okay. And also from my friend Rathel Chappelle, do you think the first vaccine will cover the two main strains of the coronavirus?
We don't know. I believe that the major strains of coronavirus are quite similar. Fortunately, the data so far show that it's not varying so much that a vaccine that's likely made against a very common portion would address both of them. So my guess is that it will cover the various strains that are out there, which are not varying like the flu vaccine, like the influenza virus covers. I don't absolutely know the answer, but my guess would be yes.
Okay. All right. And then maybe one, yes,
Dr. Hill,
yes,
just
please.
a second. Let me say there are 123 people on Facebook. I am monitoring that chat. So if you have a question, please provide it in the Facebook chat as well.
What do you, Dr. Burnett and Dr. Fuller, think about a constant social media campaign to encourage young African Americans and people of color of all ages to participate in the studies?
I think such a campaign is actually happening, but I think we have to be careful to make sure that the opinion leaders or people who have influence don't just encourage people to enroll without checking the detail. So if I were a college president and I said to my students, oh, it's a good idea for you to enroll in this, then I might be using my influence in a wrong way if I didn't say, you need to check the details of this. We need people in this study, but you need to check the details, read them carefully, talk it over with your physician, your parents, whoever advises you, make sure that the conditions work for you. Don't just do it because I say we need people. Do your due diligence. And so, yes, there should be public health campaigns or campaigns to get people of all ages enrolled, but also making sure the transparency and trustworthiness is there. So we're not signing up for something. And if something adversely happens, then we need to know there's health care, there's medical care, whatever it is that we need to have been offered ourselves in this way.
Absolutely.
Outstanding, outstanding. Okay, well, I think that was just a great discussion period, some really informed and provocative questions. Thank you, Dr. Fuller, and thank you, Dr. Burnett, for two excellent presentations. Yes, Dr. Burnett.
One question in the chat that I really want to lift up.
Okay.
Is there any risk of liability for churches if individuals read presenting the churches encourage consideration of involvement? That's local districts connectional liability. We are not encouraging people to actually participate in trials. What we are actually asking them to do is to do their research. Give me those three words again.
Yeah.
Give me those three words again, Dr. Fuller.
Pause, trust, and verify. Pause, trust, but verify. Trust enough to check it out, not sign on the bottom line, check it out. Verify that it is for you and what the conditions are and that they meet your needs and that you have the support that you will need throughout the study. But don't just say no off the bat.
What our purpose is,
off the bat.
Right. What our purpose is in these this three-part series is not to convince you to be a part of a clinical trial, but to make you aware that they exist and they provide options that any one of us should pause. Oh man. Trust and verify. Pause. I'm going to say it 5 times so I can make sure I got it. Pause.
Yeah.
Trust and verify. That's all we're saying to you all. And we're giving you the means to be able to do it in the best way that you can get informed to pause, trust, and verify.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, Dr. Burnett, I'll pitch it over to you. Roz, this recording will be available. We'll make sure that everyone knows how to access that, and so thanks to a great presentation, Dr. Burnett, for closing comments. Thanks so much.
I think I just gave my closing comment.
Okay, all right.
Trust and verify. And so I just want to show our next webinar is on Tuesday. This is with the Red Cross, Coping in Today's World, Psychological First Aid and Resilience Training webinar. It is on next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Register the same place you registered for this one. And you can also just keep visiting that, because as we develop webinars, they will be posted there so that you can register and participate. amechealth.org/webinar, no S on webinar. You will wind up in a hole that I wound up in.
Yes.
Register at amechealth.org/webinar. Tuesdays is on psychological first aid and resilience training. We have not set the next date for, oh, this is the wrong one. We have not set this date. This date is an error. Let me remove it before anybody thinks it is real. We will talk about clinical trials related to COVID vaccine some more. We'll talk about Alzheimer's disease clinical trials and prostate cancer. We're hoping that someone representing PHEN, the Prostate Health Education Network, will be with us just to give us some examples, and we will walk through how you find your own clinical trials related to whatever your issue is. Reverend Natalie, we're back to you. Send us home.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Hill, Dr. Fuller, and Dr. Burnett, and to each and every one of you. We've received a wealth of information and knowledge, and we're going to pause and meditate on it, that we can continue to trust God and make sure we verify the information if we are to participate. Let us pray. Most dear gracious and heavenly Father, we just thank you. The Bible tells us that if we want wisdom, that we need to ask God. And we thank you that you are delivering the wisdom through those that you've called and that you have blessed in the various professions and careers and expertise that you have blessed them with. And we pray that you continue to expand their knowledge, because they certainly are a blessing to the body of Christ and to society and the community at large, nationally and internationally. So God, again, until we meet again, we continue to trust you. We can continue to look to you to guide us. And we thank you in advance for your many, many blessings. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen and amen.
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 Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.